I love wizards. Wizards are probably the best thing ever. Maybe the best kind of character in all of fiction. And I'm going to give you a definitive list of the 10 best wizards ever, period. Yes, I am declaring myself an authority on wizards. Who will make the cut? Let's find out. What's not to love about wizards? Wizards are so cool that when I was a kid, I wanted to be a wizard when I grew up. And in case you can't tell by my garb, I achieved that dream. Or at the very least, I'm able to dress for the job I want instead of the job I have. Wizards bring a magical element, pun fully intended, to a story. And wizards bring a variety of particulars to a group dynamic. Sometimes they stand by the wayside, only offering a hand of guidance when most needed. These kind of wizards tend to be ancient entities, as old as the world they live in, with sufficient mystery around their origins. Other wizards let us follow them as a more central character, and we get to see them stumble and struggle with magic along the way. When we get lucky, the wizard is the hero of the story, and we get to see them bring their magical hammer down on the ultimate evil that threatens the world. And occasionally, wizards aren't quite what they seem, pulling strings behind the scenes, getting a result one might not be entirely expecting. And don't worry so much about spoilers on this episode. A lot of the best wizards come from the world of fantasy novels. And though I never shy away from spouting out every detail from a comic or television show, or maybe even a movie, I have a grand measure of respect for books, so I'm not going to spoil books you might not have read yet that I very much hope you do feel inclined to read someday. That spoiler avoidance may make it a little harder to defend some of my wizarding choices, but I think I can handle it. Also, this is not just a list of my favorite wizards. I have the audacity to be the ultimate self-proclaimed authority on wizards. So unlike my favorite comic book characters, this list is not only my favorite, but the absolute best. Unless of course you disagree. A diversity of opinions is always welcome here. But please, suffer this old fool his follies, and let's get into it. Oh, and also, this time I got my act together, and we are doing a proper 10-to-1 countdown. So without further delay, let's get to it. Number 10 is Nor, the Chubby Wizard. This rotund spell slinger is the least known of my list by several orders of magnitude. He has only appeared in one book, Chubby Wizard Wrath of the Manticore, and I know for a fact that that book only sold about 200 copies because I wrote that book. So yeah, in full disclosure, this entry is an indulgence. A wizard who is obsessed with food acts as the patron saint of the Chubby Wizard podcast, and happens to be the specific wizard that I'm dressed like for this video. But really, give him a chance. The Chubby Wizard watches over a realm called Nidium, trying to maintain balance between the fates and muses as they quietly compete for control of the plane of existence called the In-Between. The Chubby Wizard faced off against Durgaton, the Red Warlock, dueled his arrogant brother Boar, and stood toe-to-toe with the Lich Necromancer, all while guiding a duo of his friends, a soldier and a bard, to defeat a manticore that wreaked havoc on the lords of the realm. Yes, a portly prestidigitator to represent those of us who are on the pudgy side ourselves. Nor the Chubby Wizard is number 10 on my list, even if it is kind of cheating to put my own fellow on here. Now that I've gotten that foolishness out of the way, let's move on to the meat and potatoes of this fantastic feast. 9 is Privileged Borobudur, a character from Brian McClellan's Powder Mage series. At present, the only images of Borobudur, or as I like to call him, Beau, are fan art, because he hasn't appeared in any comics or cartoons or movies. But that is set to change soon, my faithful friends. It has been announced that a Powder Mage TV series is in the works at Sci-Fi. Joseph Malozzi, who has worked on Stargate, Dark Matter, and Utopia Falls, is going to bring this excellent flintlock fantasy series to cable television. A few things about Borobudur. Though he is in the Powder Mage world, he is not a Powder Mage. He is a Privileged, which is a type of sorcerer who can touch the else and perform amazing feats of wizardry. Beau was raised alongside the central Powder Mage character as a foster brother, but when Powder Mages seem set against the royal cabal of privileged, it's not certain where Beau's loyalties will lie. Beau has what I simply say as a lust for life, as he is almost certainly the most libidinous wizard on this list. Don't know what libidinous means? Ask a parent. I don't care if you're 45 years old. I want you to call your folks up and say, "Hey Ma," or "Hey Pop, what's libidinous mean?" Number 8 comes from the world of comics, and this entry is the wizard Shazam. Not to be confused with Captain Marvel, who is now called Shazam, but the wizard who granted him his powers. That is, the wizard Shazam. He first appeared in Wiz Comics number 2 in 1940, and he is at least 3,000 years old. When he grants Billy Batson the power to transform into Captain Marvel by saying the magic word Shazam, he also reveals that he is an ancient Egyptian wizard who has been using his powers for many centuries to fight the forces of evil, but that he is now old and not long for this world. When the wizard Shazam is killed by a big rock, his ghost still reappears from time to time to offer guidance. Billy can summon the wizard by lighting a brazier at the Rock of Eternity to get that Obi-Wan style guidance as needed. The wizard has shown up in multiple animated stories as well as a live-action serial from the 40s and the recent Shazam movie portrayed by Digimon Hansu. 7. Biaz, first of the Magi, from Joe Abercrombie's First Law trilogy. There's more to this wizard than meets the eye, but I won't say more than that. But he is on this list because he stands apart from just about any other wizard. If you've read Joe Abercrombie's books, you know. And if you know, you get it. You get why he's on this list. Biaz is embroiled in a large-scale struggle in the circle of the world, but he's easy to overlook. At the time of the first novel, The Blade itself, Biaz finds himself in a world where magic seems to be dying. In fact, for a wizard, we hardly ever see him actually use any magic. He is so old that many folks think he was simply a mythical figure. And he's been in exile so long that when he shows back up at the seat of government for the kingdom he essentially founded, people think he is some kind of kook or imposter. But, well, he straightens that out in due time. The First Law novels are closer to the grimdark side of fantasy. I mean, Joe Abercrombie's Twitter handle is Lord Grimdark. So when you go into the First Law novels, be prepared for some unfortunate events. There is a comic adaptation of the First Law, so that's another option folks can check out. 6. My entry point for all the potential a wizard can hold was Dungeons and Dragons. And that led me to reading fantasy through another gateway. That, of course, was Dragonlance. There's no way I could have a discussion about wizards without talking about Dragonlance's Raceland Megere. Like I said, Dragonlance, specifically Dragons of Autumn Twilight, was my introduction into reading fantasy, followed closely by The Hobbit. But Dragonlance got me first, and the complex character of Raceland was no small part of my love for the book, the series, and the genre. Twin brother to a robust fighter, the frail and sickly wizard carries hints of darkness from the journey he once traveled. The ordeal he undertook to become a wizard left him changed physically. His hair changed to white, his skin to gold, and the pupils of his eye took on an unnatural hourglass shape. The characters appeared in several novels, and also at least one animated movie. Thanks to this character, the phrase "red robes of neutrality" will always be sculpted in my mind. As his powers grow, his mood darkens, and he seems to be on a collision course with evil. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? Absolutely! Number 5. Now we're getting into the top half. This is where the real heavy hitters dwell. And who better to take us into the top 5 than the OG wizard himself, Merlin. Known to us primarily by way of the legends of King Arthur, Merlin is an enigma. We know he's powerful, right? But we don't have a lot of examples of him using his power back then. Of course, a seemingly infinite number of adaptations and reimaginings of the character have shown us he is capable of nearly anything imaginable, but the lack of a real canon to codify his life is why he's not higher on this list. His usual depiction, based on an amalgamation of historical and legendary figures, was introduced by the 12th century British author Geoffrey of Monmouth and the translator John of Cornwall. So he has about an 850-year head start over any of the other wizards on this list. His full name is Merlinus Ambrosius, but I think Merlin works just fine. Legend claims that Merlin is magic because he is a campion, which is a half-demon. His mother was a human woman, and his father was an incubus. Despite his demonic lineage, he does seem to be a sage guardian for the once and future king, Arthur. Merlin has been painted, drawn, portrayed, and reimagined in just about every way possible. But as far as the Western idea of a wizard is concerned, Merlin is the character that laid down a lot of the traits we see through many of the wonderful wizards of the world. Number 4 brings us back to the world of Dungeons & Dragons. And there is a reason I bought that first red box basic D&D set oh so long ago. That fateful purchase that sent me into a love of fantasy games, novels, comics, shows, and movies. The reason I first got hooked was the 1980s Dungeons & Dragons cartoon. And the wizard of that team, and number 4 on the list, is Presto the Magician. Presto was voiced by Adam Rich of 8 is Enough fame, and he struggled to understand how to use his magic during his group's quest to escape the realm of Dungeons & Dragons. Presto's real name is Albert, but whenever given the choice of being called Albert or Presto, one should always choose Presto. He is the epitome of the well-intentioned but incompetent team player. A wizard can be appreciated for his effort even if his magic isn't overly impressive. I'm just gonna say that as a kid, I could relate to Presto. He suffers from low self-confidence and nervousness, which manifests in the use of his magical hat. He is able to pull an endless succession of various tools from it, but often those will be, or at least appear to be, totally useless. But there are also times when the whole group is in danger, and Presto will draw from his hat precisely what is needed to save all of his friends. Coming through when you're needed most, that's what it means to be a wizard. 3. It's really starting to get tough here, because there are going to be folks that think each of the top 3 should be number 1. And I know this selection will be no exception, but I implore you to understand that I love all 10 of these wizards and wish they could all be number 1. But alas, tough choices must be made. And my choice for number 3 is Rand al'Thor from the Wheel of Time. And Rand is definitely a warrior mage, equal parts sword and sorcery. He does follow a very tropey hero's journey, going from sheep herder to hero, and has just a touch of Luke Skywalker trajectory. But his story, his character arc, and his internal conflict are wonderfully interesting to read. Though he is probably the only polygamist on my list, he is also absolutely selfless, nearly burning himself out with his desire to protect and attempts to take all the world's pains and burdens upon himself. The Wheel of Time is probably my favorite book series of all time, and if you haven't read it, you should. It's only 14 very thick volumes, so get to it. The Wheel of Time is a very widely read series, so plenty of folks are quite familiar with Rand. But I think when the Amazon series debuts with Joshua Stradowski portraying Rand al'Thor, the Dragon Reborn himself, even more people will be familiar with the character. And I don't expect him to be universally loved, because the wizards with the toughest paths usually aren't. But he is a wonderful, memorable wizard, and more than deserving of his spot in the top 3. Number 2. A lot of pressure not to disappoint with this selection. And I'll start by saying, you're a wizard, Harry. Yup, number 2 on my list is Harry Dresden from the Dresden Files. What? You thought I might have been talking about another Harry? The Dresden Files has given me so much joy over the years, serving in my humble yet absolutely, irrefutably correct opinion as the gold standard in urban fantasy, bringing the worlds of wizarding and hard-boiled noir together in a beautiful mosaic of magic. The overly tall, awkward wizard, full of more raw power than any of his contemporaries, could easily be the king of the world. but instead he's barely getting by, because, like many of us, he can't help but get in his own way. Over the course of the Dresden Files, we get to see Harry not only grow as a magical being, but also as a person, learning the nature and value of human relationships that is really touching to this old family man who was once himself a total catastrophe. And for me, the Dresden Files are like pizza. Even when they're bad, they're good. And with any series that has as many entries as Jim Butcher's urban fantasy, some are going to be better than others. I think that despite his flaws, particularly in the early books and with his attitudes towards others, women in particular, he can serve as an inspiration for any of us who are growing older, look back on the youthful potential we once held, how our plans went off track, but somehow we redeemed it in an unexpected but satisfying way. There are no shortage of fans of Chicago's cantankerous resident wizard, but there's also no shortage of fandom in Harry. The wizard is constantly making references to comics, Star Wars, cartoons, and other stuff so many of us love. So I say hats off to Harry Dresden. And if you're a Dresden Files fan, you might get the significance of that statement. So, now we are at number 1. I would imagine at this point your deductive reasoning has concluded that only one wizard could occupy this spot. And you're not wrong. I'm not trying to subvert anyone's expectations here. Number 1 is Gandalf from The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. If Merlin was the seed from which all wizards grow, Gandalf is the template to how they should be. A class standard, if you will. The totally mysterious and practically godlike figure can switch from lovable old grandpa to majestic magical warrior at the drop of a hat. He has perfected the guiding hand technique of standing back, letting those he watches over proceed, and offering a magical nudge when needed. The robes, the hat, the beard, the staff, all wizard mainstays that I associate with Gandalf. And Gandalf has appeared in comics, cartoons, and live action to such a degree, nearly everyone, regardless of their interests, are bound to be aware of him. Tolkien described Gandalf as an angel incarnate, and likened Gandalf to the Norse god Odin in his wanderer guise. In fact, Gandalf's elven name, Mithrandir, means the Grey Wanderer. Quick to anger and equally quick to laugh, Gandalf possesses the deep wisdom and patience we've come to expect from a proper wizard. Armed with an elfin blade, Gandalf is as valiant a fighter as the other swordsmen in the Fellowship, in no way hindered by his elderly appearance when fighting or riding. Gandalf solidified the role of a staff for a wizard, using it not only as a spellcaster, but also as a walking stick and a weapon. Whether it's the hat, the robes, the beard, or the staff, when you think about what a classic wizard looks like, you're probably thinking about Gandalf. And that's why he's number 1 on the list. So, a quick recap from 10 to 1. 10. Nor the Chubby Wizard, from the mind, ramblings, and writings of yours truly. 9. Privileged Borobudur, from the Powder Mage. 8. The Wizard Shazam, from DC Comics. 7. Bayaz, the first of the Magi, from Joe Abercrombie's First Law series. 6. Raistlin Majere, from Dragonlance. 5. Merlin, from Arthurian Legend. 4. Presto the Magician, from the Dungeons & Dragons animated series. 3. Rand al'Thor, from Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. 2. Harry Dresden, from Jim Butcher's Dresden Files. And of course, number 1, none other than the singular Gandalf from Tolkien's Middle-earth. I hope you enjoyed this wizard-themed episode. Let me know what you think down in the comments. I'd love to hear who your favorite wizards are. I'm sure there is a multitude that didn't make my list. Please like and subscribe so you get more videos about comic book, fantasy, sci-fi, and related topics. If you hit the bell for notifications, you'll never miss an episode. And until next time, remember, heroes are super.